Food is more than just what's on our plate. It's the places where it's grown, it's the people who grow it, and so much more. Join me, Janice Person, your host, on Grounded by the Farm every other week as we talk about the foods we love. Hey everybody, this is Janice, and this conversation is one we've alluded to earlier in the season. I think when I was with Dana out in Maryland, we talked about somebody that we had both gotten a chance to get to know over time. And so today we're talking to Debbie Lyons-Blythe. And Debbie is a rancher in White City, Kansas. We're going to be talking with Debbie about not only her farm and ranch and sort of what they're doing, but we're going to get into something a little headier than normal. And we're going to talk about farming and transitions. It's an interesting topic. If you're not really familiar with farming, transitions is like asking people to talk about wills, retirements, and all those things at once. So it's going to be a deep conversation, but we're going to start off, Debbie, with something much lighter. So ranching, how in the heck did you become a rancher?
Like most ranchers, my parents were ranchers too, right? So it's a family legacy. It's something that I grew up doing. And I married this guy and he had a ranch down in this little town. And that's just kind of how things occur, and when it was time to have kids, after we got married, it was time to have kids. And we realized that I could quit my day job and stay home on the ranch. So now I'm the full-time rancher. I was just at a conference and they were laughing about that the banker likes to know what job your wife has to know what kind of benefits you have. And I'm like, or your husband, right? Because somebody has to provide the benefits and a stable income, right? Because you've got to be able to pay the bills every month for some reason. So yeah, so my husband, we got married in the 80s when things were really tough on the farm. The interest rates were really, really high. And so at that time, we knew we needed a good off-farm income. And so he is the one that goes to work every day. Now, we are very much a partnership. I may be here every day, but we work together all the time. It's both of us really all the time.
Yeah. And you have a background that includes like communications and stuff as well as ranching, right? So you do ranching, but you also do a lot of talking about it and sort of trying to help people understand what it is that happens in a beef cattle operation.
It's been jokingly said that I might use my communications degree more than so many of them that are like journalists, right? So I have a degree in ag journalism, but it's all about talking to the people that want to know about the ranch. So back in 2009, I started realizing that consumers wanted to know and nobody was telling them at that time. So yeah, so I actually work really hard to make those connections and talk to consumers and host tours and all of that.
And one of the things you were talking about probably more at one time is kids, because now they're adults. You have several.
Yes, several, right. Yeah, we have 5 kids, 5 grown kids. That was not what we had planned, but now that they're grown, it's amazing. There's a few years though when they were little that I don't have any memories, but now it is spectacular. I loved every stage of raising kids, but this one is the best. We've got a few of them married, a few of them coming home to the ranch. They're all making their career choices and their spousal choices and all of that. It's pretty darn cool to watch and see.
So when you say coming home to the ranch in Kansas, so not everybody has taken time to drive out there. You're in the Flint Hills. So right. Explain what that looks like.
Oh, the Flint Hills is a really amazing location. It's a really amazing place. It is, there's only 4% of the tall grass prairie still left in America. It used to stretch clear up to Canada and down to almost Mexico, the border, this whole swath. But because of either urbanization or farming methods, we've lost the prairie. But here in the Flint Hills, it is a hilly part of Kansas. Most people think Kansas is flat. That's Western Kansas. Eastern Kansas is very hilly, but it is a very shallow topsoil and very rocky. So when the early farmers tried to farm this area, they kept bringing up too much rock. They just couldn't do it. But they noticed at the time that the buffalo here got really fat. And there were a lot of buffalo here in the Flint Hills. So that's when people started bringing in cattle and realizing the value of this grass. It is a really special area. We've got a national park here too, just of the prairie. It's a really special prairie, tall grass prairie. And we say we farm grass, right? But we don't plant it. We don't fertilize it. All we have to do is manage it right, graze it right, and keep the trees out of this prairie, because the native way that the prairie was there was no trees. In fact, we're right along the Santa Fe Trail. And this was the last place to get wood for your wagon to repair it before you got to Santa Fe.
Oh, wow.
So it was the last of the trees, and they were only down where there was water. So we have to work really hard to keep trees out of our prairie.
We recently had an episode with Ryan Goodman talking about cattle and what they eat and stuff. And he says a lot of cattle ranchers are grass farmers, or, their primary focus is the grass. So I think folks will have a really good feel for that these days. When your kids come back, I assume there's a home place.
Yep. So Duane's mom, my husband's mom, lives on the home place, and that's where our barnyard is. We live down the road about a half a mile in a house that we moved out into the middle of a pasture. And so that's where the kids were all raised, is down at this little place. We also have one other house on the ranch. It's a very tiny little, it's probably smaller than most people's college apartments. So it's really small, but that's been where 4 generations have started their marriages on the ranch. So if you get to live on that place, it's because you're working on the ranch, right? That's part of your salary, right? So the couple that's living there right now, Eric and Cece, are newly married and are living there right now. And yes, they are giving X number of hours a month in order to live there rent free. Well, they actually are not giving enough, so they are paying rent to the ranch, right? Rent to the ranch. So that's only fair to all the other siblings.
Yeah, I can imagine it's hard to figure out what's fair to 5 kids.
Yes. Well, and we've always said, we never let our kids say that's not fair, right? So it was always the thing, well, I'm sorry, but there's no such thing as perfectly equally fair, right? I'm doing my best here. I love you all. I'm doing my best, but I'm sorry. She may have gotten more ice cream. I can't help it, right? But equal is not always fair. And so we try to be fair with our kids and appropriate, and everybody pays their way if they need to.
How many of your kids have come home, or do you still have kids who are deciding what they're going to do?
I think our kids pretty much have their plans set. So our daughter Megan is a surgeon. She is in surgical residency in Alabama right now. So she won't ever be able to come home to the ranch directly, but she loves the ranch and always wants to be a part owner, wants to know when we're vaccinating calves, and wants to come help, all of that kind of thing if she can. So that'll be important to her. She will come home from Alabama. She's just down there for 5 years. Our daughter Allie and her husband have said same kind of thing. They love the ranch. Neither one of them want to work on the ranch full time. He's also a ranch kid from Kansas. So they know what they're doing is where they want to be. So they probably will not be interested in moving home full time. But all 3 of our boys have said that they want to be working on the ranch full time. But that's a lot. I mean, you think about a business that will support 4 families, right? 3 boys and us still. So we're not big enough for that. We have one son that is home full time, and he still has a side gig that he runs in order to, keep going. But the other 2 boys still have a full-time job. And so like their dad, we schedule most of our big work for evenings or weekends when everybody can be there and get it accomplished. Up to that, it's tagging calves and feeding cows. And my oldest son does that every day.
Yeah. So we're slowly getting into that conversation around the transition, right? So I just want to put a disclaimer out there so people know this can be pretty personal. So I've given Debbie the right to say, hey, Janice, that question may be a little bit more sharing my kids' stories or just like off. Let's not get into that. So we're going to try and be aware that this is kind of personal, but some of it is if you don't talk to people about it, it's hard for me to understand. And I've known so many farmers, right? My family didn't have any small businesses we've run until I started one. My brother-in-law has a roofing business, right? But he didn't even start that until he was like in his 40s. He worked for a lot of roofing companies and he did a lot of and then he started a roofing business, right? So he has asked his children if they want to be in the business, if they want to take over the business. But it doesn't feel at all the same as the conversation with farmers and ranchers. So can you help people understand some of what goes in here is not just the financial aspect, it's really the emotional lure of heritage and
That's exactly it. Legacy, heritage, all of that. Duane, my husband is Duane, and his family purchased the first piece of ground out here in Kansas in 1890. So that was his great grandfather. And that piece of ground is still owned by the Blythe family. And it's gone through many different people through the Blythe family. But we are the fourth generation of Blythes to be here in this area. Farming and ranching on this ground, and different generations have added to it, and different generations have done different things. But the foundation of that legacy of being in little town White City, Kansas, doing right by this land, it's just no other way that you can explain it. But it's a responsibility, right? From his great grandpa was out here, and he saw the potential in this area. And there is a ton of potential. And when we talked to our kids, the other day, I said, you might not do things exactly like we have done things. And that's okay, because we've already changed how his dad and grandpa were doing it. They used to raise Hereford cattle. They were huge farmers and ranchers back then in the day. And we're just not the same. Now we have Angus cattle, and we are a cow-calf operation. We don't necessarily feed out all of the cattle like they used to. Of course, everybody used to do it too. But I said, if you guys choose to do it differently, that's okay. It's the land that we're passing on. It's that heritage that we want to be able to pass on.
And so I assume you've probably had this conversation with your kids without having a specific conversation. It's probably been part of existence for decades, right?
That's true. So we have a unique situation in that my husband lost his grandpa and his dad when he was a teenager. When he was 14, his dad died, and he's the only boy in the family, and the two girls weren't interested really in the farm. So my husband started farming this place at age 14. And I think that's, wow, what an amazing expectation for a young man. But if you knew my husband, you'd understand why, right? He is an overachiever, and he wanted to do it. And he felt that heritage, that pressure, that responsibility to do a good job, right? So he's been doing it for a lot of years. We're in our 50s now. And he's basically said, I want my sons to learn beside me, not because I'm gone. And boys that want to be home, we want them to be able to do that with us, and not just pass on the ownership, but pass on the business, give them the opportunity to learn what to do and how to do it and make their own decisions.
Yeah, I think I've seen this work out a variety of ways. And one way is like what you're talking about. It's a gradual transition where you get the kids in and have some exposure. And I'm calling them kids, but Trent's 30? Yeah, they've all got college degrees, and they've all done other things, right? So I call them kids, but that's because they're your children. But part of it with farming and ranching is there's so many different things to understand: the weather, the animals, it's convoluted, and experience helps you.
You're exactly right. If you don't work with your kids and explain why you do things, they'll know that it's time to do certain things, but they won't understand why. And they won't understand then, can we change that? I think a lot of times when people say, well, that's the way my dad did it, or that's the way grandpa did it, I think it's not necessarily out of the inability to change. It's more of the case that they don't really understand why it was always done this way. And so if you really think through the why, and give this next generation an opportunity to understand why we vaccinate our calves before they go to grass, not just here's the vaccines that we give and here's the day we do it, but explain to them why we choose these vaccines, why do we do it at this age, then they can choose those decisions later, right? And they're able to adapt a little bit better. But hey, you're right. Trent's 27. He doesn't always listen to his mom. So and
he's a redhead. Let me just say he's 27 and a redhead. So the listening to your parents, I know that well.
Right. Yep, you're exactly right there. But I mean, he's great to work with. I really enjoy working with him, but I just know that a 27-year-old man is not necessarily listening to his mother all the time when she says different things about why. So we're writing a lot of this down. I've got a whole calendar of all of the different things that we do different times of the year with cattle, and Duane's got a whole calendar of, the feeding and why we've chosen different things and how much. So all of that is we're ready to share that with the kids and be able to make sure that that is involved in their decision-making process, and that they have that to fall back on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know you've kind of talked about with your kids is getting that business experience is really important, not just getting the experience with the cattle. You've encouraged your kids to get that kind of experience, and each one of them has something different going on, right?
That's exactly right. So we told each of the kids, get a college degree, get a side gig, and that is probably the way that we'll be able to handle having more families back on the ranch, because God is not making more land, right? So it's hard to buy more land and expand. So we really need this land to work the best that it can and get the most out of it. But we also need these kids to be able to have something to fall back on that will give them that insurance and stable paycheck kind of a thing. So make sure that they've got that. So Trent, though, when he graduated from Kansas State University, he graduated in a program called Wildlife and Outdoor Enterprise Management. And that is teaching kids how to run their own hunting or fishing enterprise. It's not wildlife and parks. So he has a pheasant outfitting service as his side hustle. So he runs hunts on the weekends for the most part, and raises pheasant and does all that with his wife, who feeds them homemade meals and houses them and all that kind of thing. So that's an excellent side gig for him that kind of gives him his own thing. The other two boys right now that have just kind of started really returning, and to be honest, we're really looking for the right way to merge them in, because Trent has been home for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Tyler and Eric, it's not their fault that they're younger, right? But they are just that many years behind and are now ready to come home and be a part of it. And they want to be, and we need to figure that out. But we also need to value the fact that Trent's been here for 4 years with his blood, sweat, and tears immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So they both have a full-time job right now. And so they're available on evenings and weekends also. Yeah. Tyler and Eric. And that has worked out really, really well. But I do know they would both like a bigger role in the ranch. And so that's a thing that I think we've got to just sit down as a family around the table and be really, really open and honest, and just really talk about what do you want to see in 5 years? And what do Duane and I want with the ranch, with the land? What is our expectations, and how can we fit you people in a way that you can do this without us, right? Mm-hmm. So if we set it up, I feel like if we do a poor job today of creating that communication strategy among those guys and their spouses and everything, then I think that we've set everybody up for failure. And nobody wants to do that. I don't understand farmers and ranchers don't talk about this, because nobody wants their ranch to fail. Nobody wants to hand it to the next generation and have it be sold. Nobody wants that.
I think you and I have both seen kind of the worst of the things that could happen, right? And I mentioned, I know somebody who's like in their 30s. They're the youngest of a lot of kids. And so the older kids are well in their 60s and stuff. And, at different times they've tried to talk to their parents about, well, what can we do as far as the transition? And some families have had children go away and never want to come back, because this is hard to talk about, right? Like it's hard. You said you're in your 50s. It's not like, oh, I'm ready for the pasture myself, right? So it's like, how do I stay really challenged and mentally engaged and all that kind of stuff? And then, some of the stuff you have to do, it's probably nice to have 3 20-something-year-olds to do it.
Yes. Yeah, the physical stuff is wonderful to be able to have some young men to say, hey, boys, I don't feel like lifting all those 50-pound sacks. Are you guys able to get that loaded for me? Yeah, they're great. But yeah, it's a challenge because, we're talking about what's going to happen when I die. And
Yeah,
nobody wants to talk about when you die. Nobody's comfortable with that. And I get
right.
it. But it reminds me back to the unique situation that we're in. This family, the Blythe family, has seen a lot of death, and we've had to deal with it in a practical way. I mean, yes, it was mentally tough on my husband to lose his dad at 14, but he's also had to learn to deal with that and deal with back then they had estate taxes and, all of that kind of thing to deal with. And we've just said, you know what? We don't want to do that to our kids.
Yeah.
He didn't expect to die then, right? Nobody says, oh, today's the day. I better have this all written down for everybody. You never know when it's going to happen.
Right.
So our opinion is, let's share it with the kids. Let's make them a part of the communication with it.
Rather than getting to your 80s and suddenly going, okay, we've run the ranch our way all this time. Now who wants to take it over?
Right. So we are anxious, and Duane is really good at this, is asking who wants to take over this specific task. So he'll say, who wants to go build this fence? We need this fence built. You boys want to do it? Okay, that'd be great. The ranch will pay you to do it. And then not micromanage them.
Yeah.
Right. Let them go out and build fence. He taught them how to build fence. He knows they can build fence. He could be out there saying, oh, that corner post is crooked. Oh, you did that one wrong. He could do that. But that's not teaching the kids how to make the decisions themselves. And everybody's got to learn and mess up some too.
I was going to say, and if the fence breaks and cattle get out, then those are the people who have to go get the cattle back in.
Yep, that's exactly right. We all make mistakes. So
right.
We've kind of decided that those mistakes are probably better to be made now when we can help fix them.
Yeah.
Than made later when we're gone and they go, gosh, I have no idea what mom would have said with this, how to fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the really big things that you think about as like, it was so good to learn this from my family, or luckily I had somebody else in the community for Duane, right? What are the biggest pieces that you need to learn from experience? Because you can't teach it at school.
I think every geographic area is different for that. I think it's mostly just the practical things about what happens on the ranch. So do you plant soybeans this year? Do you plant corn? Do you look for a cash crop of wheat? Do you make sure that you've got enough hay? You've got to decide all of those things. Also, is it the right time to expand the herd? Maybe we should cut back on the herd and raise heifers, more. So those kind of decisions are the ones that we're trying to include the kids in. And when Duane and I got married, we didn't do any more farming. At that point, we leased out all of our property for farming. But when the boys came home, they said, we want to farm. Okay, well, we didn't have any equipment, right? So we needed to buy a combine. We needed to buy, equipment to plant. We have a special planter to no-till and all of that kind of thing, which we didn't have before. Mm-hmm. So we had to make some really tough decisions about how much money to put into equipment. Duane did a great job of including those boys and taking them to the banker too. I think that's one of the things that, so I sometimes talk about transition planning, and it's under the guise of sustainability, because honestly, if you have a transition plan, then you're way more sustainable than many, right? If you've figured out how to transition. One of the questions is not only, are you interested in the ranch, and how are you going to do that? But if mom and dad were to be gone today, would the banker work with your kids?
Oh, wow.
I think that's really a tough question, because if it's always been us that have done the bookwork, that have signed the loans, that have done everything, do they even know my kids? Right. And that relationship is so important. So important on the ranch.
I think it's the same kind of thing that we try and teach our kids, our nieces and nephews and stuff, about advocating for themselves on the job and stuff too, right? Like, you think you deserve a raise. Okay, let's talk about what that looks like and how do you present that information in a way to get it considered by other people. It's the same kind of thing that you have to do for the bank, right? But it's usually a long time kind of relationship of the same bankers. And if they've never seen that these kids are managing the money and they're they're the ones that are deciding, are we going to increase the herd? Or they've been there as you guys were making those decisions. It's a very different kind of world than I think a lot of us think of farmers and ranchers, right? Because I would love to think of you guys as focused on cattle the whole time.
Yeah.
But you have to focus on the land, you have to focus on the labor, you have to focus on the health issues, you have to focus on the financial issues and the environmental issues. So like helping your sons understand those different areas, it's not something you can learn in 4 years of college.
That's exactly right. And so part of our transition plan also includes, of course, our girls, because they both do love the ranch, but they don't want to be involved in the day-to-day operations, right? And so it would not really be right to make our boys go to them and say, hey, we're looking at making this change, right? Because they're not even involved in it day-to-day. So that part of the ranch, that operational part of the ranch, they'll probably keep their fingers in as far as percentage of ownership, but not very much. There really is no reason to give them a whole lot of day-to-day ownership of anything. But really what we're passing on is the land. And so the boys are going to be the ones that work the land, you know, whether it's with cattle or whatever. And so they're the ones that are going to deal with that operational, but all 5 of our kids will inherit equally in the land. And so it's important too that our girls understand that, and that our girls are a big part of why we do things on the ranch. And they have been, that's how they were raised. Yeah. They get it. But it's important that they're still involved in the communications and how is that land doing, right? And you know, what decisions are we making to make the land better every year?
Yeah, well, they can just take all that knowledge back to this surgical room, and as they're doing prep, they can go, well, you know what my brothers are doing today.
That is a good one. But I'll tell you, doctors don't get any nutrition classes or like one in med school. Yeah, which is disturbing, I believe. And so Megan has quite a really good education in nutrition because of her agriculture roots, because everybody studies that, because we want to make sure I don't want to raise beef if it's not good for you or good for the planet. It is good for you and good for the planet. So when she has a patient that is having issues, right? She's going to be a general surgeon doing all sorts of gut surgeries. That's the new thing, right? Is gut health. Mm-hmm. So she's able to bring that in and also recognize that a dietitian is really the most important person in that conversation. And I think a lot of doctors forget that. But so anyway, so I think Megan really will benefit from being a cowgirl and also a surgeon.
I love it. I love it. I can see it now. She's gonna change the world just differently than the folks that are on the ranch full time. And I assume, so for now, everybody comes back for the holidays and stuff like that, right? This is where you want.
So we're at that funny stage where there are no grandkids yet. And there are 3 married, 1 engaged. Megan is engaged. And Tyler has a very stable, significant other, shall we say. So we'll see where that leads. But with no grandkids, they come back and it's just awesome, you know, and it's easier stuff right now. And we have some of these conversations. We just sit down to dinner, and Duane's always done that. That's just talking about things at the dinner table. So while all 12 of us, right? So everybody with their significant others, 12 at the dinner table routinely whenever we're all home is really cool. It's a really fun conversation, and it's very educational as well. It's fun to learn from them. We told them go to college. Okay, so we sent them to college for a reason. Get smart and come back here and help us, right? Not just, that's the other thing. So many people, I feel like, are afraid of their kid saying, let's do things differently. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to say we embrace every idea that they have, because, well, we don't. Some of those ideas, you know, we've thought through before too. But if they come home and say, hey, I learned this in college, let's try this, we want to learn from it. You know, if it's a thing, we're all over it. That's great. We did that on purpose, right?
Yeah. So tell me, knowing, you know, how siblings are, do working with family, working with your children, working with your siblings, You make it sound like communications is just like a walk in the park. We're all
Yeah.
having dinner together. There's those times when it doesn't work so smoothly too, right? And I always think, one of the great things about my job is I would leave the job when I came home. There's no leaving it when you're living on the ranch and everybody else is living on or next to the ranch. Do y'all have like a zone where you don't discuss things?
No, we don't have that zone. And I don't know if that's good or bad, right? I don't want to ever, though, be that, okay, now let's put on our business hat and do that. It's just kind of how we function. So
Yeah.
I'm sure the kids do and will fall into their old roles, which is good and bad, because I want them, though, to each bring something to the ranch. And so that is the struggle today, is trying to figure out exactly what that looks like, right? Because each one of them wants to do something within the ranch. And right now, Trent's doing it all. So we want to value the fact that Trent has been here doing it all. But he also knows that we didn't have 5 kids to let only just one inherit. That's not the way it works. We want all of them to have a part. So like I say, it's really important. And no, it's not always easy. And then you add in significant others. And those significant others are important because I'm a significant other.
Right.
And if I weren't here, this ranch wouldn't look like it does.
Right.
It would still be here. Duane would definitely still have it and still be working it and all of that. But I have helped to create what it is in this generation. And so we know that those significant others do the same. And so we want to value them, but it also is, these kids are the ones, right? These young people, whatever it is. But
we keep calling them kids, but that's your website calls them kids. So
no, I know it is. They're the youngest are 26 and Megan's 30. So that's the gap: 26, 26, 27, 28, 30.
26.
Yeah, it was a lot of kids really fast, but today it's awesome. Back here, that's where the blur is. I got no memories of that first 2 years with little kids.
I love it. Well, is there something that I forgot to ask you about? This was really the conversation I wanted to have, because I think we all put off some of those conversations in our families, right? Like, I mean, not just around farming. Plenty of us probably need to have those conversations with family members and thinking about the fact you should have them. But I know you're really into sustainability.
But I am the incoming chairman for the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. So I'll be the chairman in April.
Yay.
And I believe that conversation has been going on for a long time around sustainability, climate change, environment, that whole thing. And farmers and ranchers have tried to ignore it. And that's crazy, because we are the biggest environmentalists ever. And so my charge is that we have to get involved in the conversation, because I would rather be involved in writing those than in just taking it. So the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef has producers, we have feed yard operators, we have packers and processors and retailers, quite a few really cool retailers that you would recognize. And then also allied industry. So, those that don't fit into sector, but they're a company that is making claims themselves, right? Sustainability claims. And then also some of the original organizations that were pushing the conversation around sustainability, and some of those environmental organizations, they're members. And we are agreeing on how we can make American beef be sustainable. American beef is already the most sustainable beef in the world, but we still need to keep getting better. And we've got to get the data to fight the misinformation that beef is bad for the environment, because that's not true. But it's just like all the advocacy we've always done, right? We've got to get the information behind it.
The conversation around beef is an interesting one. I do think sustainability is one of those pieces that comes up time and time again. And to know that farmers and ranchers are actively interested in making sure people have information available to them, right? Like It's not trying to find the data to prove what you think. It's
Right.
trying to find the data that's actually out there that shows what's happening. And then let's decide what happens or what needs to happen.
Generating electricity and transportation are really the big two. Even in the United States, those are the biggest. There are other countries that beef is a contributor, but really in America, agriculture as a whole is 10% of greenhouse gas emissions, and livestock then is like 2%.
Yeah.
So of total greenhouse gas emissions. So even everything that we do is not going to save the planet, right? If we do everything perfectly, it's not going to save the planet, but we do have to keep getting better. Everybody does, right? They're best management practices anyway. And a big part of that, and I really appreciate getting to talk about it, is transition planning. Because if you can keep that land in grass, you are sequestering carbon. There's so much land in the Western United States that cannot grow crops. We just can't. Our topsoil is so shallow here in the Flint Hills that if we wanted to actually farm on some of these hills, it wouldn't grow anything worthwhile. It would be a waste of our time and energy. We'd be using a lot more resources just to grow something here. So the best way to utilize this land is to keep it in grass, keep it sequestering carbon, because especially here in the Flint Hills, we sequester a lot of carbon. Our roots go down 20 feet.
Wow.
Way more than most of the trees in America. Seriously, this grass is amazing. So if we can keep this in grass, how do we do that? We graze cows on it. It's awesome.
Turn that grass into protein.
That's it, man. That cow is amazing. She eats things that we can't eat and turns it into delicious protein.
I love it. So where can people find you online before we sign off?
I do a lot of my connecting on social media. Kids, cows, and grass. All one word, kids, cows, and grass. And then for farmers that want to share about sustainability and learn what I'm doing on the ranch, specifically connected in Farmer Talk, right, is Debbie LB is mine. So just search Debbie Lyons-Blythe, you'd find me. Mostly Instagram is what I'm really focusing on these days.
I love it. All right. Thanks so much, Debbie. We're going to put some photos and things, some video of the farm and ranch. I do want to put all that stuff up on the website so people can look at it. And knowing some of my friends are pheasant hunting kind of people, I want to make sure that we put information on how to get in touch with him as well, because you never know who might be hunters that are listening.
Yeah, and he has an Instagram account too. So his hunting outfitting service is called Level Creek Outfitters, and that's what it is on Instagram and also on Facebook. And all of his contact information, a phone number is right there to give him a call and learn about coming out to hunt.
Sounds great. Thanks, Debbie.
Thank you.